At 69 years old, Tom Hanks is not the kind of man who speaks loudly, shocks audiences, or tears others down to make headlines. And that is exactly why, when he finally speaks honestly about someone like Rob Reiner, people listen closely. Tom Hanks was born Thomas Jeffrey Hanks on July 9, 1956, in Concord, California. And from a very early age, his life taught him lessons about instability, observation, and emotional awareness. His parents divorced when he was young, and as a result, Hanks moved frequently, living in different homes and environments, often feeling like an outsider looking in. This childhood experience shaped him deeply. Instead of becoming bitter, he became observant. He learned to read people, notice small behaviors, understand moods, and sense emotional shifts, skills that would later become the foundation of his acting style. Raised mostly by his father, Hanks learned independence early, developing a quiet resilience and a strong sense of responsibility. These early years did not give him comfort, but they gave him empathy, and that empathy would become the guiding force behind every major decision he made in his career. When Hanks discovered acting during his college years, it wasn't fame that attracted him. It was storytelling. Theater gave him structure, purpose, and a place where emotions were not weaknesses, but strengths. After leaving college, he committed fully to acting, taking small roles and facing rejection without complaint. His early television work, especially on the sitcom Bosom Buddies from 1980 to 1982, showed audiences his natural comedic timing and charm. But beneath the humor was something deeper. Even then, viewers sensed honesty in him. He wasn't playing jokes, he was playing people. That authenticity followed him into early films like Splash and Big, where he portrayed innocence without exaggeration and joy without foolishness. Big, in particular, revealed something rare in Hollywood: an adult actor willing to be emotionally open without irony. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, Hanks was already becoming known as someone who cared deeply about character, meaning, and truth. This was not just about acting ability, but about values. Hanks believed that stories mattered, that audiences deserved sincerity, and that filmmakers had a responsibility to treat human experiences with respect. These beliefs shaped the directors he admired and trusted. He was not drawn to ego-driven environments or chaos. Instead, he valued preparation, clarity, kindness, and honesty. This is important to understand because when Tom Hanks later spoke about Rob Reiner, the truth he told was not dramatic or negative. It was rooted in shared values. For Hanks does not mean gossip or conflict. It means integrity. It means how someone behaves when the cameras are off, how they treat others on set, and whether they care about the story more than their own power. Long before working closely with directors like Steven Spielberg, Hanks had already developed a clear sense of what kind of creative environment allowed him to do his best work. He believed that great stories come from trust, and that trust begins with respect. That belief would later define how he viewed Rob Reiner, not as a loud visionary or controlling figure, but as something far more rare in Hollywood. A director who listened, who valued collaboration, and who understood that the best performances come from safety, not fear. This mindset, shaped by decades of life experience, failure, success, and reflection, explains why when Tom Hanks speaks about Rob Reiner, the words carry weight. They are not rehearsed praise. They are earned respect, grounded in shared principles formed long before fame arrived. As Tom Hanks entered the most powerful years of his career in the 1990s, his choices began to reflect not just talent, but intention. Winning back-to-back Academy Awards for Philadelphia in 1993 and Forrest Gump in 1994 placed him in a rare position of influence. Yet instead of chasing prestige or dominance, Hanks leaned further into stories about humanity, vulnerability, and moral courage. In Philadelphia, he approached a sensitive subject with dignity and restraint, helping audiences see fear and illness through compassion rather than judgment. In Forrest Gump, he created a character who was gentle, sincere, and emotionally honest in a world often driven by cynicism. These performances were not accidents. They reflected a deep belief that kindness could be powerful and that truth did not need exaggeration. As his career continued with films like Saving Private Ryan, Castaway, Catch Me If You Can, and The Green Mile, Hanks became known not just as a great actor, but as a stabilizing presence on set. Directors trusted him. Crews respected him. Fellow actors felt safe working with him. This reputation did not come from control or dominance, but from consistency and humility. Behind the scenes, Hanks believed that filmmaking was a shared effort, and that the director's role was not to command, but to guide. This philosophy is where his connection to Rob Reiner becomes meaningful. Rob Reiner, known for films like Stand By Me, When Harry Met Sally, Misery, and A Few Good Men, shared a similar belief in character-driven storytelling. Reiner was not interested in spectacle for its own sake. He cared about dialogue, relationships, and emotional truth. When Tom Hanks later reflected on Rob Reiner, he spoke about him as a director who trusted actors, who respected the script, and who understood when to step back. The truth Hanks revealed was simple but powerful. Rob Reiner was not a director who needed to dominate the room to be effective. He created environments where collaboration thrived. Hanks admired this deeply because it aligned with everything he believed about storytelling. In Hollywood, where egos often clash and power struggles are common, Hanks saw Reiner as someone who valued preparation over intimidation and clarity over chaos. This honesty stood out. As Hanks moved further into producing through his company Playtone, he carried these same values forward. Projects like Band of Brothers, The Pacific, John Adams, and Masters of the Air were not driven by flashy trends, but by respect for real stories and real people. Hanks wanted historical accuracy, emotional truth, and human focus. These projects demanded leadership that was calm, patient, and collaborative, qualities he admired in Rob Reiner. When Hanks talked about Reiner later in life, he didn't frame him as a genius or legend in exaggerated terms. Instead, he spoke about reliability, honesty, and trust. He emphasized how rare it was to work with someone who did not need to prove their authority at every moment. That, according to Hanks, was the real strength of Rob Reiner. He understood that actors perform best when they feel supported, not controlled. This truth may not sound shocking, but in Hollywood, it is uncommon. Many successful directors are remembered for their temper, their intensity, or their ego. Reiner, in Hanks's eyes, represented something quieter, but more enduring. He represented the idea that respect creates better art. As Hanks aged and gained perspective, he became more selective about the stories he told and the people he worked with. His truth about Rob Reiner was not revealed in anger or controversy, but in reflection. It was the truth of a veteran recognizing another professional who shared his belief that storytelling should always honor the human experience above all else. As Tom Hanks entered his later years, his legacy became less about awards and box office numbers, and more about influence, consistency, and character. Beyond acting, his work as a producer, writer, and storyteller reflected a man deeply aware of his responsibility in shaping culture. His voice work as Woody in the Toy Story franchise introduced his values to younger generations, teaching lessons about loyalty, growth, and acceptance without preaching. On Broadway, his performance in Lucky Guy proved that even after decades of success, he was still willing to challenge himself and step into unfamiliar spaces. In his personal life, Hanks remained largely private, navigating marriages, fatherhood, and family with the same discretion he brought to his professional relationships. His first marriage to Samantha Lewis occurred before fame, during years of struggle and uncertainty, and produced 2 children, including actor Colin Hanks. Later, his marriage to Rita Wilson became one of Hollywood's most enduring partnerships, built on mutual respect and shared values. These personal experiences deepened his understanding of trust, compromise, and long-term commitment. By the time Hanks reflected publicly on Rob Reiner, he was no longer speaking as a rising star or a performer seeking approval. He was speaking as someone who had seen every side of the industry. The truth he shared was not meant to surprise, but to clarify. Rob Reiner, in his view, represented the kind of filmmaker Hollywood needed more of. Someone who believed in people first and product second. Hanks made it clear that working with Reiner reminded him why he fell in love with storytelling in the first place. There was no manipulation, no unnecessary pressure, no ego battles. Just preparation, trust, and respect for the work. That was the truth. In a world obsessed with conflict, Hanks offered something different. He offered honesty without cruelty. He showed that admiration does not need exaggeration, and that truth does not always come in the form of scandal. Sometimes, the most meaningful truth is quiet recognition. As he looked back on his career at 69, Tom Hanks understood that the people who mattered most were not always the loudest or most famous, but the ones who helped create spaces where others could do their best work. Rob Reiner was one of those people. This truth, shared late in life, reflects not just Hanks's opinion of a director, but his entire philosophy about art, collaboration, and humanity. It explains why audiences have trusted him for decades, and why his words still matter. Ultimately, the truth Tom Hanks told about Rob Reiner was not about controversy. It was about respect. It was about how real success is measured not by power, but by the ability to bring out the best in others. And in Hollywood, that may be the rarest truth of all. At 69 years old, Tom Hanks speaks differently than he did in his younger years. There is less performance in his words and more reflection. Time has stripped away the need to impress, leaving behind a voice shaped by experience, mistakes, and growth. When Tom Hanks looks back on his life, he doesn't talk only about awards or box office success. He talks about people who taught him how to listen, how to stay grounded, and how to treat others with respect in an industry that often rewards ego over empathy. One of those people is Rob Reiner. For Hanks, Reiner is not just a director he worked with, but someone who helped define what storytelling should feel like. Honest, human, and deeply respectful. But to understand why Hanks values those qualities so much, you have to understand the path that led him there. A path shaped by personal struggle long before he became one of Hollywood's most trusted faces. Before Tom Hanks was known as America's most reliable leading man, he was a young actor trying to balance ambition with responsibility. In 1978, he married Samantha Lewis, a fellow actress, at a time when his career was still uncertain. They were young, hopeful, and building a life together while navigating the pressures of adulthood. Over the next several years, Hanks's career began to take off, especially during the 1980s. With success came long working hours, frequent travel, and a growing distance at home. Hanks has since admitted that he was not emotionally prepared for the demands of fame or the responsibility of maintaining a marriage under that pressure. The relationship slowly weakened, not because of a single moment, but because of accumulated absence, distraction, and emotional immaturity. The couple divorced in 1987, ending a marriage that had deeply shaped Hanks's early adult life. Looking back, he has spoken openly about the pain and regret he felt afterward. He has never blamed one person or simplified the experience. Instead, he has acknowledged his own role, admitting that he didn't yet understand what it meant to be fully present for a partner, for children, or even for himself. That period of reflection stayed with him. It influenced how he approached relationships, work, and collaboration moving forward. It taught him that success without emotional awareness can come at a real cost. Samantha Lewis later passed away in 2002 after a battle with bone cancer, a loss that deeply affected Hanks and their children. Though he has always been private when speaking about her, Hanks has consistently shown respect for her place in his life and for the family they built together. Their children, Colin and Elizabeth, grew up navigating the complicated space between public attention and private grief. Colin Hanks eventually built his own acting career, working steadily in film and television, and earning respect not because of his last name, but because of his ability. Elizabeth, on the other hand, chose a quieter path, sharing her thoughts occasionally through writing, rather than performance. Through it all, Hanks learned that being a father mattered far more than being famous. These personal lessons followed Hanks into every part of his career. As he matured, he became more aware of how environments, especially creative ones, can either support people or break them down. He began to value directors who understood that actors are not machines, but human beings with emotional limits. This is where Rob Reiner enters the story in a meaningful way. When Hanks speaks about Reiner, there is a noticeable shift in his tone. He doesn't speak like someone praising a colleague. He speaks like someone describing a principle he believes in. Rob understands that movies are about people, Hanks has said. If you don't care about the people on screen, the audience never will. For Hanks, that idea is not just about filmmaking, it's about life. Tom Hanks believes that the greatest directors are not the loudest voices on set, but the most attentive ones. When he talks about Rob Reiner, the word he returns to again and again is listening. According to Hanks, Reiner listens to the script, listens to the actors, and listens to what the story is trying to say. This may sound simple, but in an industry often driven by deadlines, budgets, and pressure, it is surprisingly rare. Many directors focus on control, but Reiner, Hanks explains, focuses on understanding. That approach creates an atmosphere where actors feel safe enough to be honest, vulnerable, and real. For Hanks, this kind of environment is essential to meaningful storytelling. Reiner's background as an actor himself plays a key role in this. He knows what it feels like to be on the other side of the camera, waiting for guidance, clarity, and trust.